To this Friday webinar series, which we at the EGROW Foundation started about 3 years back. We have been very successful in the sense that we started the series with a view to look at the contemporary issues that the country is facing. And we also wanted to bring in a blend of the experts, academicians, public policy makers from India and abroad. You'll be happy to know that we have been very successful in that blend. We have had 2 Nobel laureates, and in these 170 webinars that we have done, we have had a balance of speakers from India and abroad. We have been also fortunate that we have done a series for G20 under the Task Force 5, looking at the International Atomic Order. And the series that we are now thinking, and the first one we are piloting today and sort of doing a dip test, is on empowering women for India at 2047. The thought that was behind this is, while the Prime Minister and everybody in the country is talking of 2047 and the GDP at that time, EGROW, and I was amongst the few who had been arguing, we'll have to go granular, sectoral, and state-wise. I also felt that India has the lowest labor force participation amongst the females. The global average is 60%. In our neighborhood, it's around 80%. Our country, the female labor force participation is about 20%. If we look at the competitive exams, we look at the enrollment in colleges, and I myself experienced it at IIM Bangalore. The number of women in elite colleges is increasing. Their absorption into the market is also increasing, and their contribution worldwide, and there are studies now which show that, is also very important and significantly contributing to higher GDP. A few years back, the IMF came out with a study which showed that if the female labor force participation increases, the GDP of the country can easily increase by about 25%. That would mean if India is growing around 8%, and if our female labor force participation increases, we could be recording a 10% growth. What more to ask for? It is keeping that in mind, and that we are in the G20 lead position now. We are organizing this seminar as a pilot, and we'll follow it up in view of the feedback that we get with 10 others, which we have thought. To do this, we have had a request for getting a blend now from the industry and the academics. And that is why in today's webinar, we have 2 professors, both from Delhi University and heading elite colleges for women. And we have 2 persons from the workforce. Dr. Saluja has made her mark in the financial sector. And then Dr. Sudha Krishnan has also gone up in the cadre of civil services. So we brought them together today to pilot and discuss the issue, empowering women for a developed India in 2047. I would be introducing the chairperson of the session today and hand over the session to Madam Sudha Krishnan to carry the proceedings further. Madam Sudha Krishnan joined the Indian Audit and Account Service in 1983. She possesses master's degree in public administration from George Mason University, Virginia, USA, master's degree in English literature and bachelor's degree in English literature from Delhi University. She retired as member finance to the Space Commission and Atomic Energy Commission. As member finance, she served as the advisor to the commissions on financial business pertaining to the departments of space and atomic energy, both extremely relevant for modern India. I have known her when she was the secretary at the Expenditure Commission, and I have interacted with her extensively during that tenure. She also came and met me and did a small conference on that issue at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. She has close to 4 decades of experience in public policy and finance. She has worked in the Ministry of Finance in different capacities, where she has handled diverse portfolios, including the World Bank projects, personal matters of the central government and writing memoranda and reports for the finance minister on improving the overall effectiveness of government spending. She has served as financial advisor to the Ministry of Urban Development, and she's been a government nominee director on the boards of many government companies and banks. In her parent department, the Office of Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the supreme audit institution of our country, SAI, she has led and coordinated the production of several audit reports, including the audit of the Central Board of Direct Taxes. As Principal Director, International Cooperation, she was directly responsible for advising and implementing the CAG's international obligations, both bilateral and multilateral. In her last assignment in the office of the CAG, she was responsible for developing and strengthening professional standards and practices in audit. Even now, she continues as an independent director on boards of SBI Funds Management Limited, IDFC Financial Holding Company Limited, and Graphite India Limited. With this, I hand over the charge to Madam Sudha Krishnan to carry the proceedings further. Madam Sudha Krishnan.
Thank you, Dr. Charan Singh, for your kind words. It's really nice to renew our acquaintance after a gap of several years. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this seminar today. It's my privilege and honor to be invited along with a very distinguished panel of speakers, all of whom are leaders in their chosen fields. And it's, of course, it's a very interesting and relevant topic as well, considering that as women, we form about half the population of the country, and we contribute our skills to the workforce in many, many ways, which are essential for social and economic development. As you already mentioned, this matter of women's empowerment, etc., is a sort of a G20 issue. It's an international issue. Of course, the government of India has been undertaking several initiatives over the last so many years for educating and empowering women. I mean, we have government programs which are aimed at improving the earning capacity of women, increasing access to education, to skill training, to institutional credit, reducing discrimination and against women, and so on. I mean, there's a whole host of government programs that have been underway for many years, and of course, new government programs keep coming up. And there are also many initiatives taken up by civil society, which are aimed at empowering women. The success story of the self-help groups of India is something that is frequently referred to in academic journals. Having said that, clearly challenges remain, which is why we are all gathered here today to talk about the matter. Evidently, we need to do a lot more. And one of the main areas that I thought of is that so much more needs to be done on the economic empowerment of women. How do we increase the number of women who are in the formal sector? Because what I understand is that a lot of women are employed in the informal sector, where wages tend to be lower than the wages that prevail in the formal sector. So how do we try and increase the number of women in the formal sector where they would get better paying jobs? Of course, how do we provide a safe and secure workplace so that women are incentivized to join the workforce and don't have to think about it or don't have to drop out of the workforce because they encountered some problems or some challenges? Can we enhance welfare policies so that we don't have to drop out of the workforce to take care of families? Since I've been in government, I've been very privileged. Government provides us, it's a model employer. We get all sorts of facilities. And so we are able to take leave when required and take care of family responsibilities, but that's not always the case. I thought another very important area that we need to think about is the gap between rural and urban India in the area of women's empowerment. So what can we do to increase access to education, employment, healthcare, skilling in rural India? In urban India, women do have a better opportunities to work. But perhaps in rural India, such opportunities are fewer. I thought that the role of the private sector is also something that's very important. What more or what should the private sector do to employ more women in better paying jobs? Can we think of ways in which the private sector could perhaps allocate resources to, say, promoting women's-led enterprises? Could they do some of their procurements from women's organizations or women-led organizations to promote entrepreneurship amongst women? Could they facilitate access of women to digital tools? Because now digital tools are really important. And without having adequate IT skills, it's not very easy to get, a good paying job in any entity. So I'm not an expert on women's issues. In the various list of jobs that I have held that you referred to, everybody would have noticed that women's development or women's empowerment is missing. I've not worked in that area at all. But these are just some of the things that, one has experienced and one reads about. So I thought I would raise it. What I found most appealing, Dr. Charan Singh, about the seminar today is that we have a target date of 2047, which isn't very far away. It's just about another 2 decades away. We are already 2023. And we have to really accelerate the creation of a more equitable, if I can use that word, a more equitable social and economic order. Maybe this is going to mean challenging some of the existing definitions and the way in which we've done business up till now. Maybe we even need to wonder what we mean when we say women's empowerment. Is it just a bunch of programs that we are going to run? Or is it that we want to set in place a more enabling framework, a more enabling environment? Because in one sense, it's not as though as women, we are asking that anything special be done for us. I think we just want to have our equal rights, if I may use that word, as productive members of the workforce. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to think about new ways to accelerate the process of change. And I'm confident that with all the eminent speakers that are gathered here today, there will be many interesting and constructive ideas that will be thrown up as to how we can take the process forward. I think the way the format of today's seminar is going to be organized is that each of the 3 speakers will speak one after the other for about 15 or 20 minutes each. And then I would try to highlight some of the issues that have come up. And then, of course, we could have a question and answer. Dr. Charan Singh, you've already given a general introduction of all the 3 speakers. Thank you very much. I thought I would request Dr. Harpreet Kaur to speak. As you mentioned, she is the principal of a well-known college in Delhi, the Mata Sundari College. And I know it very well because it's right opposite the CAG's office, and I've often had occasion to be in the vicinity of the college. And I must say, one is very impressed with the college. Dr. Kaur is very widely experienced, both as a teacher and as an academic. She is the author of several books, research papers, and particularly an expert on education and skill development of young women. So may I request Dr. Kaur to please speak.
Thank you, ma'am, Sudha Krishna ji. First of all, let me congratulate Professor Charan Singh and the EGROW Foundation. Although I am not a very regular listener, but I can see the events are being held one after the other without stopping. And so his untiring efforts are really appreciable. And of course, Professor Bijayalaxmi Nanda, again, we both belong to women colleges, and Dr. Rashmi Saluja. So we have one from the industry, from the government, and we both principals who are creating these people, these women who are going into the field, into the government, in the corporate, and so on. So let me talk about this topic, which topic for me is very interesting because empowering women at 2047. Now, for me, 1947 is a landmark year for all of us, of course. It's a very significant moment in the history, and we became, of course, democratic republic. But let me just talk about women who were there in the freedom struggle. As we all know, there were not very many women who were very like women leadership was not there. But at the call of Mahatma Gandhi, masses, including the women, in large numbers came out of their homes and they participated in the mass movements, including the civil disobedience, salt satyagraha, etc. But what is more important and which has to be highlighted when it came to be becoming this democratic republic, and after the elections, we could see very few women who became the part of the government or other public institutions. They were mainly confined to their homes. For example, in 1951 and 1957, after the elections, there were only 4.50 women in the parliament. Even in till 2014, there were only 66, that is 12.15. And when we are almost 50% of the population are representative in parliament is not so much. Of course, we had at the same time reservation, that three-tier reservation, which enhanced from 50% to 50% from 33%. We could see women in the political arena, government institutions, also in the industry, academia, startups, corporate services, education, healthcare, media, and communication. These enhancements we are seeing gradually, but this 2047, which will mark 100 years of our independence, that we have to see that what our country has done towards truly becoming independent and empowered. And as far as the entire scenario is concerned, we all are very hopeful, and India is projected to be the second largest economy in the world, global leader in 2047. As far as innovation and technology is concerned, it will attract the top talent around the globe. Digitally inclusive scenario would be there, and also empowered women. Since our topic today is especially pertaining to women, so what I mean to say is that we really want to see women and that gender equality and equity that we are talking about. As per my knowledge, I think it is going to be, we are going to have reach somewhere near it, because but right now we are talking about this gender equality and equity because maybe this gender equity and equality is conspicuous by its absence. We are trying to correct it, we are directed towards achieving it, but yet it is not there, and we are striving towards it. Of course, there are a lot many policies and programs which we are aspiring for, that equal participation in all the spheres of the life should be there. Women should lead life with dignity. So I'm hopeful really that we'll have women leaders, entrepreneurs, scientists, and so on. But today, our aim is next generation women leaders. We have to create leaders. We have to educate and empower women. And for that, I think what is more important is one thing which has already been discussed by Sudhaji is that we have to bring them into the workforce. And as Charan Singh ji has pointed out, that India's GDP, of course, will enhance simply just making women coming into a part of this workforce, because in the unorganized sector, we can see a lot of atrocities, we can see a lot of differences, but what is important is that we make them a part and parcel of this workforce. But how to do that? So we have to identify where women can excel, and we have to work on it. So we have to explore the connections between the economic roles women play as workers, consumers, entrepreneurs, leaders, change makers, and decision makers. So this is, I think, our whole webinar is all about. So a selection of significant areas which I'm confident that women will steer through and will excel in 2047 if worked upon in a dedicated manner. So I see future embedded in skills. Now, this operational network of clusters where skills can be promoted, I think that is the future. So first skill, which I really mean is which is very important, is the soft skills. So what is important? If I just define soft skills in a very, very simple manner, they are interpersonal attributes that enable individuals to communicate effectively, collaborate with others, adapt to change, and demonstrate leadership qualities. So these soft skills are really coming handy in the professional arena, but also in the personal and social interactions. So a full-fledged personality of the women will be enhanced, and it will become full-fledged if we really enhance these soft skills. And for that, a lot of initiatives now have been played by the government also. So government is taking up many things where the soft skills of the women are enhanced, and today's step will lead to the changes in future. So whatever we are doing at present is going to make an impact. For example, with NEP, there are several courses and papers which have been introduced in the central and state universities pertaining to this. For example, innovation and entrepreneurship, political communication and leadership, negotiation and leadership, digital empowerment, and so on. These are going to strengthen the soft skills of the women who are taking up the education in the formal arena. Universities actually can play a very, very vital role, and they can create a roadmap where entrepreneurs can be churned out. So right now, the universities and the colleges should focus on churning out entrepreneurs and give them best of the skills. So these kind of interventions in the pedagogy, women will be empowered with this critical thinking, and then they will be able to identify solutions and also make informed decisions. Another thing which I mean is very important is collaboration and teamwork. Most of the work in the industry, whether in the government, I think we have teamwork is highlighted. So this is an essential soft skill that will empower women in 2047. And so this will have common goals, with innovation can be taken up, and a sense of community is very important. So women can excel by building networks also, nurturing relationship, and women are, I think, have a knack for this nurturing relationship and collaborating across boundaries. Today, why these women? Because most of the women who are coming to us, maybe they are not proficient with the skill sets because they lack training and also the industry exposure. Industry exposure, in my opinion, is a strategy where a woman can be put through real life situations, because sometimes what happens is we churn out those toppers, but they are not very successful as far as their real life is concerned. So what is more important is that close collaboration between industry and academia should be there, so that they are put into real life situation, and then they can work ahead, they can steer ahead. So women to that time will choose universities who will emphasize on mentoring students into professionals. So this gap which is there in the, because today what the industry wants is a ready-made professional. They don't have time and energy, and they don't want to spend also on the graduates training them. They want graduates who are already trained. So industry coming up with certain courses, with certain alliance with the academia is going to help quite a lot. So this gap which is there between the industry and academia will really be abridged with our efforts. Another thing which I feel important is emotional intelligence. And here again, women can steer through, they can control their emotions, and they can also impact the emotions of others. But one thing is more important is when we realize our self-worth, that how important we are, that self-worth has to be inculcated today in the women, so that tomorrow when they come out and they are a part of the workforce, or when they are or as a family maker also, they are in tune with their emotions, and negativity is not there, resilience is there, they can navigate through challenging situations and cultivate positive relationship. So this soft skills, another part is the communication skills. Communication skills are also very important, where we can articulate our ideas, we can express our thoughts confidently, we can have meaningful conversations, and this will have a lasting impact, because the voices of women will be heard if they are able to articulate what they really want, and they can put in across the people, then their voices will be heard. So this communication, which is introduced at the levels of schools, colleges, and universities, is going to play a very, very vital role for tomorrow, for making them articulate communicators also, and inculcating the spoken, written, as well as listening skills in them. So these kind of skills are very important. So strong relationship will open doors for new opportunities. Another skill which think is very important is the critical thinking and problem solving. These skills in education play a very, very vital role. And if I say government is truly committed to education of women from all strata of societies, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, all these schemes which are there, which have been the particular scheme which has been launched in 2015, it aims to address the gender imbalance and improve the status of the girls in India. For example, Women Scientist Scheme. Here, that women scientists and who return to work after career breaks has been allowed. They are offered research grants also, fellowships also, and so this early investment in STEM field is very important. I think one program which can be really come up is also the girls who can code, because here we'll be breaking the stereotype, and we'll increase the women in the scientific field. So these women in science, all these underrepresentation of women in science is the need of art. So these schemes are in place, but we have to see that they are actually pursued. So also the leadership skills are very important. Academic management leaders, they will help the students to be at the helm of the affairs in the administrative change and lead the institution. Today, we have a large number of STEM graduates. 80% of these occupy the higher positions, but they fall before they reach the higher echelons of the professional hierarchy. So this is the irony. Although women are there in the lower levels, but when it comes to the higher level, they sometimes fall out. So that is what we have to look today, that the women can steer that change. So with little flexibility, that is coming back after leaves, or after the breaks, maternity breaks, and so on, these kind of reforms, or this ecosystem which is flexible and women friendly, is going to help quite a lot. So through women entrepreneurs, through the various stages of idea, innovation, and acceleration, can develop a technology-based solutions for tomorrow. And this is what we are looking for today. We are trying to train our students into it, so that when they come out in the field, they have these, they become entrepreneurs and so on. Today, we are looking for the people-led development. That if it is women-led development, if I say in G20, that it is not just women development, it has to be women-led development. So these leaders should have abilities to inspire, have participatory decision making, and easily cope up with the emergencies also. So for this, self-confidence and self-esteem is very important. Another thing which I find is, although we talk so much about gender equity, but safety and security concerns are today, they are still there. Until and unless the women feel that they are safe and secure in all their ventures, through of course, all the acts which we have, but also by the societal changes. The society has to change and improve, and this dynamic environment around us is going to play a vital role. Another thing which I feel very important, and this is bound to happen, this is already happening, that a digitally inclusive environment will come in the future. Today, we have seen a lot many barriers are there. As far as adults and girls are concerned, this conducive digital environment is not there. Sometimes women are, even in the COVID, we had seen, if there is one mobile phone which the family owned, it was given to the son and not to the daughter for their educational means, for their schools. So this gender gap is there. We can see very visibly in the digital literacy, but we have to aspire towards a more digital inclusive future. Enrollment gap by gender is decreasing fast. Yes, this is a very, very positive point, but more access to digital literacy should be done. So coming up with more robust plans and implementation strategies where we can address the digital disparity more accurately is the need of the hour. We have to make it more gender responsive, and also gender and ICT linkages, which we are exploring today, should be furthered more. And also these flexible careers and flexible working hours as far as the digital environment is concerned, or probably if I just explain in terms of work from home, that kind of a thing will help a woman to manage better both work and household responsibilities. And many of the women who are not do not have so much of backing at home, maybe they can work like this. These things are coming up, these changes in the societies are coming up. Well, what is important is that women should be digitally trained, educated. But what I feel is today, even today, this is a problem that women do not get ample time to update themselves in the tech field because the technology is changing so fast. And if you have to keep abreast with the changing times, then you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of training is required. So with their predominant domestic responsibilities, sometimes this not so much support is there in the family space, and that is why women are unable to update themselves in the tech field. And that is why somehow what I feel is that they are just lagging behind. For the IT sector today, who has only 30%, approximately 30% of the women today, although it is increasing very fast. And many of the companies we know are predominantly, they are encouraging women to be a part and parcel. But again, one thing more important is that 11% only reach the senior leadership role. So it to be a manager or a professional, that is, I think, what is the aim in 2047, that we should see women at the top echelons of this professional hierarchy. So for this, strategies, plans and policies and budgets, that should be really allocated. We should work diligently on it, and capacity building of the women should be there, with special attention to the women in the rural areas, as has been pointed out, because there is a lot of gap between the rural and urban areas. So the strategies and policies should be planned in a manner that we are incorporating the rural areas into the fold. So, but then again, there are gaps in policies as far as digital space is concerned, because what I see is around the ethics or security, cyber related violence we are seeing, and privacy issues. All these are there, which are not so favorable for, especially for the women. So we have to address these gaps. But even for that matter, World Bank recognizes online safety, inclusive digital public infrastructure, and digital skills as a part and parcel of the strategy for future. So today we have to prioritize on e-learning and education for ICT education for girls. So as the countries are becoming a more and more integrated with the global value chains, jobs are increasing, wages are increasing, and a lot of prospects are there for women, and livelihoods chances are increasing. So we have to address the issues today, promote the digital avenues, and women realities and perspectives should be heard, so that we can tackle those problems in the digital space, as well as those which are there offline. So we have to empower the women. We have to make them competent with the technical and rational sides of things. So what is important is to elevate and innovate. So invest in what basic thing is, we can invest in communicating and sharing with the family, and then in the family will become a part of the journey of women, and I think that support system will come automatically. So these things which are a part and parcel that you are seeing in the familial space, changes in the family, changes in the society, changes in the technologically enabled world, and with all these changes, a lot of things will be there, and and the economic development would be possible. So I see future of the women very bright, provided we take all the chances which are available today and we do the best for our young women. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaur. Thank you. You've reminded us of the historical role played by women in the freedom struggle. And I think that's a very significant fact that it's useful to sort of bring it to the table. You've talked about how educational institutions can create next generation women leaders and the need to focus on a lot of soft skills to make women productive part of the workforce, whether it's collaboration or emotional intelligence, to increase their problem-solving skills and communication skills. And you've also focused on the importance of women knowing more in science and technology and understanding, getting better, better experience in digital skills so that we can get better paying jobs and reach higher levels in the workforce. So thank you very much for reminding us about all these important areas. I will now request Dr. Bijayalaxmi Nanda to speak. Dr. Nanda is the principal of a well-known college in Delhi, the Miranda House. I don't have to remind our viewers that Miranda House has recently made headlines for being ranked India's best college. So congratulations to you, Dr. Nanda, and to your team and to your students for this wonderful achievement. Dr. Nanda received her PhD from the Center for Political Studies at JNU. Her research interests include gender, political theory, and human rights. And she has several publications to her credit and is actively associated with many government and non-government organizations in matters relating to women. So we look forward to hearing your views on today's topic for discussion, Dr. Nanda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sudha Krishnan ji, and thank you, Charan Singh ji and EGROW. It was really wonderful to hear my fellow panelist, Professor Harpreet Kaur, friend and colleague from University of Delhi, and Dr. Rashmi Saluja, who's online and will be speaking in the panel. I'm very honored to be part of this conversation. I am going to refer to some of the issues and some of the concerns that Sudha Krishnan ji has pointed out in the particular discussion, as points that we should take up in the discussion, and also to correlate it to what Professor Kaur has spoken about and what Charan Singh ji in terms of mentioning about the labor force participation of women, especially the global gender gap report that you spoke about, talking about the decrease in women's labor force participation in India, which is a concern, and that is why we want to speak about this. Now, when it comes to understanding women's labor force participation in India, we have to look at the challenges and the opportunities. We have spoken about the importance of skill development and the kind of skills that can be encouraged in women. But apart from that, we also need to engage with the challenges. And what are these challenges? It was in 1974 that the Towards Equality report was published. And the Towards Equality report, which was basically a report from the United Nations, which was asked for each country to publish to look at the various kinds of indicators for women's growth and participation in the country. The architects or the writers of the Towards Equality report included members who were called the Daughters of Independence. You had Veena Mazumdar, you had Latika Sarkar and others who wrote that report. And when they wrote that report, they were of the opinion that they would not be seeing much of a gap between women and men in India because poverty is the major concern in India, and they would be looking at it from the point of view of a class representation. But when that particular report was out and when they started, going from state to state to look at women's participation, they were disappointed to find that there were various constraints, which you could call gender-specific constraints or gender-intensified inequalities, which stood in the path of women's participation, whether it was political, whether it was economic, whether it was social. So I think those are the challenges we really need to engage with at this point of time in this conversation. And that brings us to Sudha Krishnanji's question about how can we enhance their participation in the formal sector, in the informal sector? How can we look at it from the point of view of, let's say, the private sector? What are the ways in which we can enhance that? For that, I think we need to deconstruct or break that particular, talk about those gender intensified inequalities. What is it that we are looking at? So I believe that when we look at women's engagement in the labor market, it is a very, very complex story of engaging with the broad developmental outcomes. And that particular complex story, if you take a look at it, it is not just in India. It is across various countries and various economies. And whether it is in the Middle East or it's North Africa, South, Asia, less than 1/3 of the women of working age participate. And the proportion is around 2/3 in East Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And this variation is driven by a large number of factors, whether it is economic or it is social. And some of the things that are supposed to enhance participation include economic growth, increasing educational attainment, looking at falling fertility rates, because it's, the association of women with childcare and other things. So, fertility issues and social norms. One of the social norms is I think, barriers in access to healthcare, looking at domestic violence, looking at sexual harassment, the basic emerging issues of patriarchy. How do you look at that? And they become far more pronounced in South Asia. And this disparity definitely is highest. We are looking at the G20 cohort. If you look at the G20 cohort, you will see that labor force participation of various countries, including India, stands at about 20%, although that has been questioned by India in terms of, let's say, female political participation, because the number of women in the Panchayati Raj were not included. So that has been questioned. However, if you take a look at the average participation, you are looking at 47.78 participation, which is almost 50% in other states. So there is a gap that we need to address. The other gap that we need to address, and this is very important, and I'm bringing it to the conversation here, looking at wage gap levels, looking at care work distribution. These are two very important, talking points for us to take forward. There is also another statistical information that has emerged in India, which is the annual labor force participation rate, which is the periodic labor force survey, which is conducted by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. This is the latest statistics. And their country is showing certain improvements, 15 years and above, from 27 to 29, whichever that amount stands, to about 30%, 32.5%, 32.8%, almost all of it in the unorganized informal sectors. However, if you take a look at the ILO report, these are very encouraging trends. Apart from what Harpreet ji has spoken about, the enrollment in educational institutions. So you are actually seeing an improvement in certain ways which the country has been able to capture. But the more worrying part, because I want to bring you back to the constraints or the challenges, is that you're looking at caregiving, or at least unpaid care work, where the average, it is in India, whereas for the whole, if you take a look at the G20 cohort, you're looking about 70% women taking care of it. In India, it's almost 90%. That a large part of it, only 9% of men actually contribute to care work in the sense of home care work. And again, in wage gaps, the wage gap is also, I think, annually, if you look at the Global Gender Gap Report 2022, men earn 78% more than women in India. So, I mean, these are questions that we need to address. Gender gap is one, care work is one. The National Family Health Survey, round 5, says that 15 to 49 age group, at 32% of married women and girls in India, they are employed. However, they are employed, 83% earn cash, while 15% do not receive any payment. So that ties up with your question, Sudhaji, that what is happening in the informal sector, we need to, I mean, I may not have many answers, but I will raise these questions with you, that where is that missing link going? Like with Harpreet ji and I, when we are working in the education sector, our main concern is to enhance employability. So we're looking at capacity building, looking at the future of work, looking at IT sectors and the rest of it. But ultimately, I mean, when we are gathering graduate outcomes, which Harpreet ji will also agree with me, with the national education policy putting such a lot of focus on skill enhancement, we will have a very, very skilled workforce. But the wage levels, especially in the private, that is where we need to discuss the private sectors, the unorganized sector. That wage is very, very important, because I mean, that's one collection of data that we do for every college, and the amount that they are paid is something that needs to be, because that is not encouraging or motivating for self-reliance. So another question, another very complex question that you raised was about rural and urban women in India. Now, you know, the statistics will bear out differently. If you look at the national level, about 30% of rural women are engaged in economic activities. They're far more engaged than urban women, which is actually around 15 to 16%, which is half of rural women. Of course, there are regional diversities. You will find that. And however, you know, we would think that the counter argument would be that, you know, they are more. But here, what is happening, if you take a look at it, it is again to do about equal pay, commensurate status in the workforce. Then this particular anomaly needs to be addressed. So the urban rural differences have to be identified by differences in the occupational pattern. What kind of work are they doing? Variation in the educational requirements. Where do they enter into jobs? What are the kind of disparities that exist? Then, because engagement in economic activity is definitely an important way of measuring workforce participation, and it is a primary criteria for becoming employed. So, you know, one size does not fit all. So it's important for us to engage with that part. And the regional diversity, if you take a look at, there is a diversity between the northern and the southern part of India, with the southern part having more women participating, while the northern parts less participation. With mechanization, if you remember, with the Green Revolution, Punjab women participation fell abysmally. It fell because women did not. That mechanization led to women going back home in the agricultural sector. Wheat growing and rice growing, for example, rice growing areas had more women participating in agriculture. So while we talk about the IT sector and others, we should not lose fact of the greater reality that a large number of our population lives in rural areas. So the agricultural sector, how we work with that is important. And if you take a look at the northeastern states, in fact, women's participation is a major force there. It is higher both in rural and urban areas. Women's rural participation is in the tribal belts, their participation is huge. And certain places which have matriarchal or matrilineal societies, women are engaged in the workforce in a large number. That may also lead to a fact that men are not responsible. The women are doing double work. They are in the workforce, they're taking care of children. There's so much more that they are doing. So one of the greatest challenges does revolve around looking at diversities, looking at regional diversity, looking at intersectionality, and looking at care work. So they are the primary caregivers in India. So 90.5% of the work that they perform, which is like women use 200, I'm just quoting ILO statistics here, 297 minutes of their, you know, time goes into care work in a day, as compared to 9.5, which is 29 minutes for men. So this is in places where that work is also outsourced, the person who's employed is also a woman. So the domestic care work is provided by women mostly. And even those houses where women hire domestic labor, they also find themselves, you know, contributing to other forms of unpaid care work, irrespective of being part of the workforce. In fact, study by ILO shows that in Bengaluru and Chennai, 40% of households do hire domestic work to free up their times, but they end up caring for elders and children in the house themselves. And while they get away from the burden of cooking and the rest of it, they are doing other caregiving roles. And this is important for us to recognize. Another reason why women step out of the workforce is migration for marriages. They have to leave, and we see that a lot in metropolis, where they have to migrate, giving birth to children, child rearing, or looking at nuclear families where there is no support. So if it has to preclude about a woman leaving, so the idea of women returning home, especially in the private sector, that has happened. And also mobility, sexual harassment, security, these are issues that one needs to engage with. In terms of wage gap, we have a heterogeneous economy. There are inequalities which exist between various groups. And there is, with the gender gap inequality, something that you mentioned, whether women in STEM, with women in corporate sectors, there is that phenomenon called the sticky floor, which is that they are stuck at the bottom, and there are higher wage gaps that are there. Another point that was raised is that if you're looking at self-reliance, looking at entrepreneurship, irrespective of the kind of support that the government has provided, and now there is a whole focus on providing support to women, there are overwhelming gaps when it comes to gender. And those gaps could do with skills, they could do with experience, they could do with education, they could do with other intersectionalities, which could be caste, community, and other things. And many women, especially in the private sector, they temporarily or permanently leave work because they have to fulfill the responsibility of taking care of children. And this is something that needs to be looked at, and I think that's an important point. Now I come to opportunities, and it's important for us to note that access to education has improved for girls in India. The gender enrollment ratios has improved even at the secondary level. We see that, and although jobs across the board have not been really created in the private sector so much so that they could absorb women, especially in rural areas. These are all self-work, people are creating their own work. Household incomes have risen in certain areas. And in that case, that also potentially reduces women's participation. Because once it increases, especially in subsidiary activities, it comes down. So I'm saying that it's more complex than we lay it down. And they do contribute. Women continue to contribute to the economy, but this work is never documented. And this is important that we start also observing, because somewhere it is not, women may not be participating in the formal sense of the term or in the technical terms of the term. There is a lot of underreporting on women's participation. The census in 1991 noted secondary farm work as work. But even till now, women are not considered farmers. And that's an important point that you need to discuss. And I think this idea of mismeasurement or undocumented work needs to be considered, needs to be looked at. In terms of women engaged in domestic duties, 34% in rural areas are there, around 28% in urban areas are engaging with that. And that's something. People do part-time work. They do, work from home. These kinds of things that we are thinking are contemporary have always been happening. I mean, it's the question of how the self-help groups or women in rural areas have worked in these issues. The government has made a number of programs. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao is basically to do with education. But in terms of employment, they have the code on Social Security 2020, enhancement in paid maternity leave from 12 weeks to 26 weeks, provision for mandatory creche facility, permitting women workers, kind of flexibility in terms of timing, code on occupational safety, health and working conditions 2020, and also on women entrepreneurship. There's a, supporting women startup, the Kiran program of DST, which is bringing female scientists back to the workforce. And also to enhance the employability of female workers, government provides a number of training. Women industrial training institutes. I think awareness around this also does not exist. So that is another opportunity that we need to have. We need to create greater awareness, colleges, and we can work together on this. And in terms of budget, there needs to be greater gender budgeting. That's an area that Sudhaji can talk a little more about, how we could do that. Women's networking, mentoring, we did speak about that. But beyond that, apart from skill development and training programs, I did not want to dwell too much on it, but access to childcare, maternity protection, provision of safe and accessible transport. That's a very, very important, along with promotion of a pattern of growth that creates job opportunities. So it's the horse before the cart or the cart before the horse. We need greater job opportunities, and beyond standard labor force participation rates, they should be concerned about how women can get greater access to better jobs, or look at how they could have a startup. What are the kind of investments that needs to be done? And a policy framework needs to be created around this, and it has to be contextually developed. Now, I'm going to conclude here with what I call the 3 A's of females' labor force participation. One is asset ownership. I think women should have greater access to asset ownership, whether it is property, which they have by legal rights, but it should be encouraged. If you want women to be self-reliant, and not everybody has property to inherit or to earn or to own. So let us look at community-based, collective-based property, which women can have access to, other forms of assets which women can have access to, so that it enhances their agency, like within colleges, where they can bargain, negotiate, create better self-worth. So the second A is agency. How can you create greater agency for women, create greater bargaining power, greater decision-making power, bring them to the table, listen to the voices, women across India. And I would not just say women, but across the genders, that voice is necessary. The third A is aging. I think we need to invest in social security for aging people in India, so that women are not burdened with a lot of caregiving roles. And if there is social security and healthcare facilities for the elderly, that would be there. Then I come to the 3 E's, which is looking at education and looking at the future of work. What is the kind of skill enhancement? The National Education Policy has done a wonderful job, and we will be teaching that. But how we should link the industry to that? So if I'm going to train these women, I should know that this particular industry will take care of this particular workforce. So that link between employability, so that conversation needs to happen. The industry should sit with us and say, okay, these skills are commensurate with what we want, so you can bring them to our office. These are the areas. The other very important part is, when we look at entrepreneurship, we should also do it by emphasizing on environmental concerns. So focus on green jobs is a very important part. I think that goes very clearly with the gender, kind of linkages here, gender and climate linkages. So women, I don't want to specifically say that women are different from men in that sense. I mean, they have the right to have the same choices, but I feel that an emphasis on environmental concerns should also be linked up with these jobs. So that could be one entrepreneurship that women would be best. I think it would be encouraging to look at gender and climate, and look at environmental concerns, and look at entrepreneurship on those issues. And the last point I want to make is that there has to be empathy. Women are not one category. They come from various communities, various categories, class, caste, community interfaces. And we have the first generation learner in college. What are the kind of support mechanisms we can provide? So there is one, it is important that that all these women come with dreams. And when we are recording in University of Delhi, and you just said that the NIRF ranking has come, even colleges like us, we are trying our best to look at graduate outcomes, see that they are placed in good jobs, and try to bring about their placement. But we are still looking at 25%, 30% of them getting that kind of job, which is commensurate with their dreams. So how can we make them achieve their dreams? That's what we need to work with. And as educational institutions, and as the government of India providing us the support, the private sector has to step in. There has to be corporate social responsibility to bring women to the forefront and have them, not just as leaders, but as women and girls who exercise empowered and informed choices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nanda. Thank you for reminding us of exactly how serious the problem is that we are talking about. I mean, I was shocked to know that women earn 78% more, that men earn 78% more than women, and that almost 90% of women have caregiving responsibilities. I was equally shocked to know that as per the NFHS survey, almost 15% of the women who are employed in the informal sector don't get any wages. I mean, you've just brought home to us the enormity of the problem. And as you rightly said, I think we are now in India, we are reaching stage 2 of the problem of women's empowerment. Stage 1 was, do we have access to education, etc. That problem seems to be pretty much addressed. All you educationists have done a fantastic job. But now we get to the other bigger problem. How do we get women to be productively employed and get the right kind of wage? You've reminded us of the rural-urban gap and the regional diversities, and you've clearly told us that a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. And therefore, we have to think of other ways to get around this problem. And thank you for telling us about the 3 A's and the 3 E's. I think this was very beautifully summed up. And of course, I do agree that perhaps the contribution of women to the economy is not properly documented. The contribution is perhaps more. But having said that, the challenges remain, as you have very wisely pointed out. Thank you so much. I now request Dr. Rashmi Saluja to join us and to give us her views on the matter. I'm going to request you, Dr. Saluja, to be a disruptor in this seminar. So far, the voices that we've heard are all boring government, educationists who are looking at the problem of women from the point of view of how do we get these young girls to be employable, what are the skills we should give them. We heard Dr. Nanda tell us about the statistics and how wide the gap actually is. And you are a person, as you know, when I read I must tell all the participants, when I read Dr. Saluja's biodata online, I'm just blown away. I don't think there is a single professional degree that she does not have. She is an MBBS, an MD, an MBA, an LLB, and a PhD. I mean, Dr. Saluja, it's so remarkable, this CV. Further, let me add, she is the executive director of Religare Enterprises. A lot of you would have read about Religare some time ago. Now we are all reading good things. And she's been at the helm of the organization at a very, very difficult time. And she's widely credited with having turned it around, which I can assure you is pretty much impossible in India. And she has achieved the impossible. So as one of the more influential women entrepreneurs and leaders in the industry, she's also deeply involved in several social and charitable activities. So I request you to speak, Dr. Saluja, and to tell us what you think we are doing wrong, or rather what we need to do differently if we really want to get a handle on the issues before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudha. Thank you, Dr. Sharan Singh, for inviting me. But let me tell you one thing, I'm actually not the right person to be talking about women empowerment. This is a topic which I don't really understand, that what exactly women empowerment is and what is required out of it. So that's something which as Sudha just gave me that comfort that I can be myself, and I might not sound very apt for today's conversation, especially after listening to such amazing talks given by such empowered women. And first, I really feel that I am empowered enough, and maybe whatever I would be telling or talking about, it is a statistics that I have not felt. I feel they are, of course, these are the numbers given by people who have gone through in the fields and have actually derived these numbers and all that. Having said that, I would like to talk from my perspective as an individual who I am. And why am I empowered? And why is that other women cannot be empowered? So that is something which is a conflict. I wasn't born differently. I was exactly the way, and I didn't come with a silver or a golden spoon. And I was, I was born in a family which was basically mediocre as far as the income is concerned, but very high values. And my mother has not been a specialist in any formal education way. But then why is it that my parents raised me the way I did? Or what was it different about me that I have become what I have become? So, like as any other normal child, I was an aware child, and I feel that one of the biggest strength that I derived was by seeing things around, being curious, and putting my curiosity to the right reasons and the right way. In my growing up days, I haven't seen any discrimination happening with me or around me at all. So why was it like that? I really feel that the only two aspects in the entire force of women empowerment, whether it is rural, urban, or tier 2, tier 3 cities, or anywhere in India, our mindset is actually nothing to do with that I am inferior at all. We are, in fact, women in this country, by and large, are born with a superiority complex. And that is exactly what we have inherited in our culture, in our history. Of course, there has been a dark history. There has been a dark period. It has been, in fact, the British history, the Mughal history, then, of course, the partition and all those things. But one of the most important things that we all, in fact, have been brought up are with the stories. And those are not the mythological stories. They're not the myths. They have been the stories of history, whether Rama, God Ram, Krishna, all those, in fact, we don't consider that as mythology. We consider it as Indian heritage, and we consider it as Indian history. And that is what has actually got into us. In fact, we've been talking about advanced space programs. We've been talking about advanced surgeries. We've been talking about plastic surgeries. All these have been extremely well documented in all our books, and it has been very well exampled through. In fact, if you read Charak and Sushruth, we will know that plastic surgery in India has been, in fact, India has, in fact, originated with the concept of plastic surgery and even the medicine, and we have given it out to all over the world. And we've been very simple people. We have, by and large, created all complexities into simplicity rather than making simple things complex. And like the space programs we have been talking about, it has all been documented. So in fact, the glory of Indian history is a couple of 1,000 years old. And that is what, in fact, makes us a superior race in our mind. Whatever difficult hundreds of years that we've gone through, but we've still not been burdened with that complexity that women were empowered or not empowered and what exactly they would need to do it. We just need to reorient it ourselves. We just need to believe in ourselves again. I'm not going to get into the complex statistics and how the policy interventions and reforms have been made by the government, which is extremely great. I only want to say that let's actually consider that how, in fact, for all socio-political reasons, India has been always compared to China. So let's consider India and China. That why China has become what it has become and India still has not reached the glory of what India was. And I really feel one of the major and the basic reason is that Chinese went on to believe and went back to their culture. And holding on to their culture again has actually got them to become what China has become. They wanted to redo it, everything. They wanted to start it. They didn't want to inherit the Western ways of doing things. They wanted to do it themselves. They actually believed in physical and mental equality of their people. And that is how I really feel as basic as going back to their culture, their inheritance is what China has become, what China has become. We dislike them, but China is very inspiring in certain areas. In fact, with this new dispensation of the government that has happened, and that's exactly what Prime Minister is trying to do in our country, is he is holding on to our culture. He is talking about being Indian, make in India. I have never seen a situation in which, whether in bureaucracy, whether in merit, men and women have been discriminated. In fact, I don't feel in the corporate world also that happens. There is never a disparity. In fact, I got into a situation of relegare in spite of the fact that not only that I am a woman, but I don't come from a hardcore financial background. And yet I was given this opportunity. And there's a very dear friend of mine, Mr. Uday Kotak, and I asked him that Uday was given this responsibility of ILNFS at the same time I was given relegare. So I asked him that, what is exactly that you feel and why do you think I'll be able to do it? He said that you don't come with a very definitive and a fixed mindset. You are here going to improvise the situation as it comes. You're not going to be exactly the way we come. So you'll be able to do better. And that's exactly what I experienced. I loved being a woman because I could actually use my basic instincts of being multitasking things. And yet, in fact, all the degrees that Sudha just mentioned actually fitted in some way or the other. And that is exactly, I really feel, being a woman was far more empowering in actually turning around relegare than coming with a set thought process that, okay, this is how it should be and this is how it should, because I had nothing to lose. In fact, every time I used to go to the regulator and bring up my case, and they used to really feel that, okay, give it another chance because I'm sure it's not going to happen. And maybe if it happens, let's look at the miracle. And thank you, Sudha, for appreciating that we gave the money back to you guys as well. So
we were celebrating yesterday. Thank you. So I should tell all the participants that thanks to Rashmi turning around her company, SBI Mutual Fund, on which board I sit, as you said, Dr. Charan Singh, got back 200 odd crores. That's a huge amount.
So two of my lenders are sitting here, Dr. Charan Singh and you. And I don't, in fact, so it was basically a lost case and everything. And I really feel that that is, in fact, one of my attributes of getting on here was maybe my being a woman, and I could do or I could think something which was just not normal. And being abnormal is the new normal in our country. So that's exactly how it should be. In fact, all women in our country should be given an equal opportunity as far as the education is concerned. And rest, let them work out like any other person, because men are underprivileged, women are underprivileged. The importance is that how much of inclusion the society should bring from all quarters of life. It is, in fact, we are also including, we are talking about gay law, we are talking about men, we're talking about women, we're talking about handicapped or specially able. So this is a society now which is going to be nothing to do with a man or a woman. This society is how much can you become productive to the society? I have to think myself, and as big as I will think, I will contribute. So all these things that we're talking about, being in a rural sector, being in an urban sector, being in an agriculture sector, in a pharmaceutical sector, it is for equal opportunity for all. When I take up any interview, I don't think so. I consider, is it a man or it's a woman? I feel whether this person is able or the person is not able. So let's actually only talk about how much able can we give that opportunity in the basic education and motivate all the parents to actually just push their children, men or women, boy or a girl, to actually go, and then it is totally up to them how much they would like to reach out. In fact, I really feel these days women are more privileged than men, because there are seminars on women empowerment. I haven't seen seminars on getting male empowerment or getting them into any better situation. We're talking about them. We've got ministries dedicated to child and women. Where else would this happen? We have got budgets allocated for that. And those budgets are only and only, I feel, should be done in a way where the meritorious children should be produced, meritorious girls should be produced. Whether they want to, in fact, I feel I take a lot of inspiration from my mother. My mother was not working at all. In fact, when I say not working at all, is not being the bread earner of the house. But look at that lady. She ensured that all of us are empowered enough to contribute in the country. So I really feel parents should be really empowered. Every expectant mother, I feel, whether comes from an affluent background or comes from not so affluent background, should be not only told about how well the conception and the delivery of a child should be, but they should also be taught that what exactly they need to have known about how they should bring up their children, what is there to offer their children. What are the, in fact, rather than actually reaching and telling them about Manrega or a Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojanas and all those things, we should be talking about how best they should bring up their children. We should be actually nurturing and making it a very compulsory subject, and that exactly the government is doing, actually rewriting history for all right reasons, actually empowering every citizen of this country by showing them the right path, making them a good human being. And that is what it is going to be, actually not trying to utilize the allocated budget for people who cannot actually strive to it, but creating budgets themselves to actually move ahead. That is what actually I really feel we should be actually working upon. In fact, wherever I see, whether I, in fact, talk about my organization or I talk about being induction or inclusion of getting in armed forces or in combat sports, there are women and they're doing extremely well. We have to give them more opportunities. We have to ensure that when women are traveling, they have to be a little more privileged. They should be given hygienic places to go. Security should be much better, so that the parents should never feel that my child or my daughter is not safe. If all those basic problems go away about survival, about living up to an expectation, then I don't think so there is a problem. In fact, why only, in fact, a person who's coming from an absolutely rural background, but I'm sure if Sudha or anybody else would be sending their daughters outside, they want to know that there is a basic safety. They know that there is police there. They know there is safe measures there. Everything else is the same for everybody. There is an IT, there is IoT, there is technology. Everything is same for everybody. Internet is more well aware. I would know more technology than my other male colleagues would know. So that comes naturally. But what I don't want to use my mental space is that my basic requirements, if I'm traveling, whether the women hygiene is well taken care of in the way that there are toilets, that's where in fact, the government is really working very well on. Don't let me compromise on my basics. I will do well myself. That is what I really feel. And I haven't seen, in fact, in any which ways, we have got presidents which are women, we've had prime ministers which are women. What else we need? There are equal opportunities for all and more. And we have more reservations also. While I can still be a general category, but I still have a women category. So in fact, my pie is bigger. But I have to utilize that pie. I have to reach out to that pie. So I'm, in fact, not going to be talking more. In fact, I would request, in fact, if Sudha can open the house for more conversation and more discussion. And I really feel that all the other statistics and talking about women inclusion and GDP, in fact, Dr. Charan Singh is an expert in it. And we will be very happy to, in fact, be taking up all the questions. And all the best part of the discussion has already been done by Dr. Harpreet and Dr. Bijayalaxmi Nanda. And let's have a more interactive session. That is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Saluja. And thank you for ending the seminar on a very upbeat note, which is that it's all a matter of using opportunities that come one's way, whether one is a male or a female. And of course, there are certain basic issues that have to be gotten right for women as well as for men, which is security, safety, access to basic facilities. But having said that, we need to forge ahead and we need to have the confidence to pick up and run once the basic amenity, the basic infrastructure or the basic facilities are in place. So it's, I think, a very positive note on which to end the discussion and to realize that there are opportunities out there. There is a basic framework that is available for everybody to move ahead. Of course, there are problems. We will not deny the problems and we don't ignore the problems either. But we still move ahead and we meet these difficulties head on with all the confidence at our that is available to us. And with the help of marvelous educators like Dr. Kaur and Dr. Nanda, who are spending their lives getting young women organized, equipping them with the skills that will enable them to move ahead and become productive members of the workforce, and to understand that everybody, the government, the private sector, civil society, everybody is trying to work to find answers to the problems. Having said that, the problems are immense. I think Dr. Nanda reminded us about that. We need to keep that in mind as we move ahead. So now I'll open the floor for questions. I'm a little unfamiliar with the WebEx model. Yes, Dr. Charan Singh.
So if you are opening it, can I ask my questions?
Please, please.
So first thing,
you could just indicate which speaker you are addressing your question to, please.
So the first thing I want to mention is when I was thinking about this panel and I put it on the Twitter and website, I got a couple of people calling me up saying that to empower women, you are only taking views of the women. How about we men? We also have a role, right? And I said, yes, but to empower men, women also have a role. And the way men have got empowered is because there is some women who have sacrificed their life behind you, and that's why you have got empowered. So, and he said, well, Professor, you are still wrong. You should know a good webinar, a good classroom, a good workspace is efficient and productive when both the genders are there. Well, so I think I'll have to come out with the second version of this. The second thing I want to mention is, and that was again the input that I got, that was that you have already gotten all the 4 empowered women.
Yes.
How are they going to tell you how to empower women? They are already privileged and empowered.
Agreed.
Agreed. Totally.
And one of them told me, look, I'm already so empowered. I feel pity on you men that you are doing a seminar on us. And what empowers you to do that? So I have faced this criticism in the last 10 days, but I am open to it. And I think today's discussion brings it out so beautifully. Now, I have a question, and I don't know, because as Dr. Saluja mentioned, that is her strength. She brings thinking out of the box. And Madam Sudha, you are right. If you look at the way she, and I'm in the financial world for nearly 40 years, and I know how to make a sinking boat sail again. Even Titanic couldn't do it. And you only need a wizard to achieve that. And many of us have sat in chairs of boards when banks were in losses, and to even bring it back to a profit takes life. And here you have the deer back running like anything. So I think Dr. Saluja always undermines herself by saying it happened accidentally, but I know nothing happens accidentally. Now my question is, how you understand what is women empowerment, and what you understand from that. We will have series of talks on that. One of the persons I have thought of inviting is Ratna Sahai, who has worked a lot at the IMF on this issue. She will come towards the fag end. During this time, till August, we will have people who have worked in the rural areas on women. I myself have worked in Tumkur in Karnataka for financial inclusion, and how women are denied to even meet a business correspondent because the business correspondent is a male. And how, when the cash transaction takes place, the male intervenes and collects the cash and obviously does a cut for his evening drink. Seen all that myself during my surveys. Now my question is that given the longevity of women more than men, the fag end of the female lifespan, sometimes in these households which are not empowered or which are still rural or which are in the midway. Of course, Dr. Saluja brought to us that if you go back to your culture, this sort of a situation which we are talking probably wouldn't have arisen. And she's right. If you look at the literature in the pre-Vedic areas and even early Veda period, women were as empowered as men. And it's just because we got ransacked and plundered and the foreign powers came in that all this discrimination started to a great extent. So I think much more needs to be looked into. But my point is where we are, given the longevity of life of a female, can there be social security products which we can provide to hedge poverty during her old age? My own research in this area, which is published at IIM Bangalore, my own research shows that the physical ailments, sicknesses that a woman suffers from, and then isolation and suffering, which in many cases, not all, bring them to places of pilgrimage where they get abandoned by their families, and then they live the rest of their life in these places, are a cause of concern. So, Madam Saluja, my one thought was, would you think in terms of insurance products at old age, where we can, in the current context, till we go back to the Ram Rajya, in the current context, where we can hedge against the poverty and medical challenges that women face? Professor Nanda, you are from Miranda, and I have been very closely associated with Miranda because my sister was educated there while I was in Khalsa, right opposite. And we both faced challenges at that time because all the Khalsa boys wanted to be introduced to my sister. And many Miranda girls wanted to be introduced to the Khalsa boys because they had the cars and the motorbikes. So I have seen Miranda from a very close quarter. Really appreciate that you have become number one in the country today. My own feeling is in Delhi, given the female discrimination that you mentioned, documented so well in ILO report and you read it, what is that we as learned or educated or aware people do to now narrow that gap? And I'll give you one illustration and I would like to know what you think about it. I'm not from Delhi. I used to rarely live in Delhi until 2 years back. But the number of female beggars I see on the streets of Delhi at the cross sections of traffic lights hurts me. Many of them are young mothers carrying their children along. And I've always wondered, will these women ever be in a safe zone and can they become independent? And you know, there are researches on who beggars are, who collects the money. This is just an illustration. Do we have any strategies whereby we can bridge the gap for our women? Professor Harpreet, you spoke about skill development. You know that you also mentioned about the ceiling. While Professor Nanda spoke about the sticky floor, you spoke about the ceiling, the hard glass ceiling to break. But you run a college with so many women there, and your chairman is known to run skilling centers across the country and has been rewarded with Padma Awards for successfully doing that. Are there skilling programs which we can provide to our women female labor force which can enhance the quality of output they can provide? I totally agree with you. The sticky floors make them so sticky that they end up being stenos and typists, and the maximum come in scale 1 as officers. So, Professor, do we have any skilling techniques, maybe as Dr. Saluja mentioned, infusing them with confidence to take the challenge and break the glass ceiling? You know that the government said we need more women on the boards, and that didn't happen because there were no women waiting to come on. Is there programs where we can skill our women to come on the book? Sorry for little lengthy intervention. I apologize, seek forgiveness. And Chairperson, Madam, back to you.
So shall I first ask Dr. Saluja to respond in the order in which you asked the questions?
Sure. It's a very pertinent and a very important question that Dr. Charan Singh just mentioned. I run an insurance company as well. And definitely insurance is very, very important for everyone. And inclusion of insurance is one of the most important things that IRD is dealing with and the government is also dealing with. And Ayushman Bharat has been there. And a lot of private companies like ours have been talking. In fact, the best health, whether it is preventive health or whether it is screening of the health, is really important in this country. And for that, insurance is really an important tool to actually penetrate. In fact, unfortunately, in India, it is just 12 to 13% people are only insured. And that is, in fact, at large, it is a problem. And at large, this is a challenge that the government is facing. Having said that, women definitely need insurance for a better medical thing. And not only at the geriatric or the fag end of their lives, but what they really need best is to start with is at the time when at the time of the delivery. In fact, their prenatal checkup, postnatal checkup, and their delivery is a very important aspect, because if they are going to be healthy mothers, they will actually deliver healthy children. And that is, to start with, is the most important thing. There should be special packages. There are now maternal, paternal leaves happening, but there should be some sort of a package for even absolutely rural belt women, and even this labor women and all categories of all professions, in fact, including the housewives. This should be a pre-mandatory thing. Like, you have a Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. Similarly, we should have some sort of a policy for expectant mothers where they can be, they should have an access to very good health facilities. And of course, insurance in the private sector and even in Ayushman Bharat should be inclusive of it. That is one point. Second is definitely we have to in fact, try and work out something for the geriatric also. And it has never been included, but now we have started working on it. And geriatric, and I'm talking about for men and women, both we are talking about. And we really feel that there is never a person till a person is alive is never in a space where it becomes non-productive. There is always some role or the other to be given. And the way we are actually working out, in fact, is how well can we cover them, whether they have been retired, from government setup or from other private setup also. And people who've never had insurance earlier in their lives, how can they actually have a very safe kind of a thing? So a lot of the CSR activities, in fact, I would always be talking about, we do a lot of CSR, and I really feel that we've been doing for children, we've been doing for specially able children, but I think so CSR should also be working for the old age and actually providing a lot of shelter and medical facility for old age homes. And it should be definitely be backed with the insurance, so it becomes so much more better. And they remain part of the, they remain healthy, their mind remains sound, and they should be part of in fact, the normal population. And we are definitely working on it, Dr. Charan Singh, and this was a very important topic. Geriatric providing insurance to them has been a very important point with the IRDA. And we are definitely working on it, or at least my company is definitely working on it. And maybe we are going to show a path to a lot of other organizations to follow. And that is a mandatory, and that is our social requirement also. Everything is not about money. Everything is about inclusion of everything. And we are definitely going to do that for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saluja. Could I request Dr. Nanda to take up the question that Dr. Charan Singh asked? If I recollect, he asked you about how we could bridge the gap in all these, these statistics that you pointed out and the wide disparities. Is there any way of doing anything about it.
Thank you. And I'm also very happy to know that, Charan Singh ji, you have been associated with Miranda House and been close here. I would like to say that I'm also happy that you raised the question about aging, because that's one focus that even I presented in the paper with the 3 A's, that aging or old age security, and Dr. Saluja also for speaking about the importance of health insurance and geriatric care. Having said that, when I was examining the challenges and the statistics that I presented, if you notice, those two challenges are mostly in the personal sphere. So it is amongst men and women, the sharing of household work. And while we do give importance to the fact that women do a lot of nurturing and caregiving roles, how can we get them to share that? And especially in nuclear family situations. And that's also a change in certain areas, that families have become nuclearized. I think gender sensitivity right from school, which has been emphasized also in the NEP. That there should be gender sensitivity in schools, and this is across the gender spectrum, across the intersectionality, looking at various forms, whatever that sensitivity is necessary, that emphasis has to be made. And that will bring about greater inclusion, so we can address questions around caregiving roles. When it comes to the other challenge that I brought in from the NFHS data, which says that in the unorganized sector, some of them get paid and some of them do not get, 15% do not receive any payment, which is unpaid work for women. Therein, I think in the unorganized sector, the equal remuneration for wages, that kind of a lobby, because the government rules and regulations, and we always say that India is a policy heaven. It is actually a policy heaven. Take a look at the various policies and programs we have for women. I agree on that. We are also a legal paradise. We have the best laws for women. But when it comes to implementation in the unorganized sector, we need to put emphasis on that. And that is an area that we could work on. And that is an area that we have a policy center and gender lab in college, and we are trying to enhance awareness, trying to write it in various languages, bring it down to the grassroots if we can. What are these laws? What are these policies? How can equal remuneration be practiced? Another point that is coming in through also the chats is that how do you look at sexual harassment in formal and informal sector? In the formal sectors, especially in educational institutions, there's a lot of awareness. But in the informal sector, the government has made the policies also put a lot of emphasis on it. So how can we, spread sensitivity, awareness, capacity building? What are the ways in which we can engage in that field? Awareness being a very important part, gender sensitivity in families, looking at how, marriages can be more equal in terms of sharing responsibilities, providing that kind of a sensitivity to couples. That is the kind of work that is necessary. I again put emphasis on the fact that the government sector, the wage gaps are absolutely not there, because it is equal pay for it. It is in the unorganized sector that we have to put emphasis on. And when it comes to corporate social responsibility, although I do agree with Dr. Rashmi Saluja that we need not specifically make supportive mechanisms for women, but I feel that we haven't come to that cusp yet. And because of the historical disadvantages that women have faced, or due to the fact that they are stepping, there's still a gap, even in STEM, even in other areas. So some kind of an affirmative action is necessary. And that affirmative action will come in from the corporate sector, because the government is doing its bit. But the corporate sector, the private sector has to match up. Take a look at maternity leave. Take a look at the kind of childcare leave we get. We are actually very privileged in the government sector. But when it comes to contractual jobs, when it comes to unorganized sector, when it comes to the private sector, that support has to be worked on. Once that is done, and once that equal opportunity is done, then we are living in a, post-patriarchal world. We need not be worried about these concerns. So I would say that the policy framework has come to a particular point, and this is exactly what I'm saying, that a large portion of the workforce is in the informal sector. So we need to work on these issues, and it is important. I feel that with EGROW and Miranda House, ma'am is also there, if there is a way in which we can create a certain kind of recommendations, we could share it as advocacy papers to government sectors. To government sector is already there. They are doing their best. I think now is the point to look at the informal sector and to take a close look at areas. And you did mention about beggary, which is actually a crime. So how do you bring about civil society involvement on this? That's an important question. And I think educational institutions, you have brought it to my notice again, because we do become desensitized. So I think as a college, we will also look at this as part of our community outreach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll request Dr. Kaur to respond to Dr. Charan Singh's comment.
I think Dr. Charan Singh pointed about this glass ceiling. I think that is a major problem which we are facing today as far as women is concerned. Because what I see is that there are so many women who have so many degrees. I think Dr. Rashmi Saluja is one of the examples. But sadly, that these women do not end up with a job. Dr. Rashmi, with her own expertise, is very lucky, but we see a large number of women who are not part of the workforce, despite the fact that they have a lot of degrees. So what I believe is, again, that skilling part is very important, and that skilling can be enhanced. And then only I think the women can come into the workforce. And for breaking this glass ceiling, I think the major concern is that we focus on the skilling, and of course the governmental schemes are coming up and so on, but CSR, I think that can and part of the industry, that can be one way how the skilling can be enhanced amongst the women, and amongst the women not only in the rural areas but also in the urban areas, both the areas, because the rural areas the major problem is there. Even if the women want to do something and come out and break free all these barriers which they are facing, but sometimes they do not have access to financial literacy, that financial inclusion is not there. They do not have access to maybe loans and how to take those loans and bring up and to start any enterprise and so on. So these things are still a major problem. So these social surroundings which the women are facing, until and unless that is really changed, the mindset of the people is changed, education merely is not going to solve the problems. We can try our level best at educating the people, but educating the minds of the people is very important, that we have to treat everyone equal. And also women can come out with this technological based solution, this tech based solution against violence. All these are new things which the women can think, and we can come up with these tech based solutions. And then the problems which society is forcing upon the women, by historically also, we can say, those problems will be I think erased only then. So we have to set the targets, set the goals, and that skill gap can only be reduced, that if we talk about the periphery around which the woman is living. And then only I think industry-led skill training is important. Even the university can take up the skill training. Skill centers we can open, and all these are there, but we have to mobilize people to come there, mobilize the women to come there and take up the challenges. And I think then the future generation is going to belong to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I did see somebody raise their hand physically. Am I wrong?
I think Madam Ratna Sahay, she
Ratna
is.
Sahay. Yes, I think you did want to say something. Please come in.
Thank you very much. This has been very, very enlightening. I'm somebody who worked outside the country for the last 30 years. I was at the International Monetary Fund. And thanks to Charan, I'll be coming and speaking at some point. But I just wanted to raise 3 quick points. I think, I agree with a lot that you have said. My perspective is very, very international. I led the IMF's first gender mainstreaming strategy, which was adopted by 190 countries. And I think a framework is missing. The framework is, we talk about many types of barriers and many types of outcomes. And I think we need to have a framework in the country of let's identify the barriers, because wage gaps, lower labor force participation are just outcomes. So we need to get to the source. What are the source? And as you rightly said, the lack of education is not the only barrier. There are many, many barriers, and in our paper we've outlined that. So I'll just mention them very quickly, and these include insufficient access, of course, to education. We've made progress, but also to health, to financial assets, to real assets, financial access, and this is one area which I'll come to in a second. Legal barriers, not just on paper, but practice, as you were just mentioning, the care economy, sexual discrimination, leadership of women. And what I found when I was comparing other countries and India is we are among the worst off on the social and cultural norms. We really need to get to that. So that was the first point I wanted to make. I'll elaborate more when I speak next time. The second point I want to make, because I am in the privileged company of two principals, let me also very proudly say that I graduated from Miranda House before I went on and did my PhD in the US in economics. I'm a macroeconomist by training, but I got into gender towards the end of my career. And I would, of course, come to love and give a talk, Dr. Nanda, at some point, because what I am doing now is I want to give back to my country. So I am working half-time in India. I joined NCAR as a professor there. But that we can talk bilaterally. The third point I just wanted to alert you, and this is to Dr. Saluja. Dr. Saluja, I don't want you to go away thinking there is equality, that we can just about do anything. I have seen that, I have experienced that. I come from Bihar, from one of the most backward states. I know what I overcome, but we are just a handful of people. And even though we are empowered, we've had to struggle. So even the example of China that you gave, I led a mission of 30 people for 2 years to China. That was on the financial sector. But I observed that there were no women in senior positions. I was meeting, central bank governors, top regulators, top leadership in the private sector. There are no women. And now if you look at the numbers, actually, since the liberalization, the parity between men and women have increased dramatically, especially on wage gaps. So let's also say that, even if you make progress, you need to continue making progress and making sure that they don't fall behind. The COVID showed, for example, and I'll just quote one number from the World Economic Forum, that the parity between men and women globally, it says that it will take 130 years at current policies to close the gaps between men and women globally. This was after COVID. Before COVID, it was only 100 years. So we lost 30 years. So this is a real problem. Let me just stop there. I just wanted to give a flavor of the global perspective, because that's where I come from. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we've all been reminded of the challenges that we are faced with. And it's not going to be easy to overcome it. 130 years gap, that's going to take some closure. So we have to find ways to deal with it. I think what Dr. Saluja was also trying to say is it's not enough to just say carve out separate spaces for women, meaning in terms of sort of a reservation policy, if I may use that word. But more just, I think probably I would take her point to be that given that there are these challenges, but let's also not go to the other extreme of saying that, okay, let's make buckets, because once you start making these buckets, there's only so much of maneuvering space that is available with government or with the private sector. I mean, I sort of look at it from that point of view, but thank you for sort of highlighting your international experience and again, reminding us of the seriousness of the challenge. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? I know there have been some chats going on, but
I see Professor Shalini Sharma raising her hand.
Oh, did she? Okay, sorry, I seem to have missed it. Please, Dr. Shalini Sharma.
Good evening,
Could you
panel.
please
It was a
join
beautiful,
us?
lovely panel, and it was been very informative listening to all of you. I have been doing some research, and some of my PhD scholars have also been doing research on women empowerment, and we have been focusing more on the informal sector and the micro sector. There are three observations I'd like to share with you. Maybe some solutions for the same can emerge from the panel. Number one, when we were doing the women empowerment at the micro level, at the micro MSMEs, we've found that number one, the women, they did not know how to use the bank accounts. They did have their ATM cards, but the male folks were using it. Though they were the main bread earners of the house. Number two, the women, along with other women who have worked together, proved to be the major hindrance for the women to rise up in the ladder of their occupational hierarchy. And number three, we have observed that if there are 4 children in the house, then the girl child is made to stay at home, look after the household, and the male child is allowed to go to the school. And the last observation I'll make is that during the corona time period, when in the informal sector, and this I'm talking through the NGO we were working, we wanted that some masks be made by these women who were linked with the NGO, but the husbands refused the women to do so, saying that they have to take care of their household itself only and not make any money. Right now, the time is not good. We will not allow the women to go even to purchase any cloth or anything else for making the masks. And that was basically because the males themselves were not earning and they could not bear the women going out and start earning. So these are a few observations which we have come across, and maybe some solutions from the panel would be a great help. Thank you.
I'm wondering who would take that question. Would it be Dr. Kaur?
Yeah, I think best thing is that we talk about financial inclusion, and financial education should be given to them, especially centered around earning, spending, budgeting, borrowing, saving, and other financial services. So we can train them, the rural women, into it. And one thing which I'm seeing at the grassroots, at the larger level, is the self-help groups which have come up. And these self-help groups are making women economically independent, and since they are economically independent, they can even raise their voice against maybe their husband who is a drunkard and who is maybe beating the wife regularly and so on. All these grassroots problems, I think, are being faced by the women because they are economically independent. So this financial literacy, financial education, and all those things are going to help quite a lot, and especially their inclusion into the economic mainstream. I think that is going to help them. And this program of microfinance, which I see is actually working, sort of, it is bringing about a change, a revolution at the grassroots, and things will improve in the due course.
Dr. Nanda, would you like to add to this? Maybe she's not there right now. So any other questions? Dr. Charan Singh, can you see any other hands up? Can
you hear me?
No.
So, the internet became a little unstable.
Right.
So could you please, I couldn't hear you.
So I think Dr. Shalini Sharma was raising this question about domestic violence, about, what her research has thrown up in terms of finding that women are not in control of their own resources. You talked about asset ownership, for instance.
Yes.
So
yes, I heard that. I think it's a very interesting study. In fact, I feel that violence against women, if you take a look at the latest NFHS study, seems to be it's slightly better. It's definitely better in terms of women reporting on violence and also wanting to understand violence in different manifestations. We have more reporting of sexual harassment, so that's also a positive. And we do have a redressal of that. But these are obstacles. And I feel, and I'm just saying these studies are important. I think one thing that Miranda House can do, and also we can tie up with all of you here, is to examine ways in which we could work on these obstacles. Like whether it is in the rural, we have adopted 5 villages. I'm sure Mata Sundari has also adopted a few villages. How we could work. We are looking at women's empowerment through various skill development, but this could be another area. So yes, that could be. And violence is across the age spectrum of age. And when it comes to accessing resources, some of the impediments have to do with the fact that they will perhaps, I did a study on property ownership, and women wrote off their property to their brothers because it was about bargaining. So it was about, the general sense was that if they are moving out of their marital homes, if they're moving into their marital homes, they are not going to get the love of their natal homes if they are going to take away that property. So asserting property rights, and especially, looking at that from the point of view of dowry. So I think dowry prohibition, which we don't talk about anymore, that is related to women's control over property. And we need to stop dowry and bring about greater rights to property. That's important, but not everybody has property to pass on. So we look at collective ownership, look at other forms of enhancing asset ownership for women. That's very, very important. What are the other assets that women can own and earn? There are various policy frameworks where they have looked at, revenue, property, within property, giving registration in women's names, and then, not making it slightly better for women to access that through rebates, to various discounts. And these are important ways, bringing more women into the workforce within the revenue sector. Other ways of asset ownerships can be looked at, but collective ownership is another area that we could look at. If women could collectively own land, agricultural land, these are issues that have been talked about. And yes, we do have, in terms of domestic violence, women are speaking up. The silence, in some sense, even in rural areas, you will notice more reporting. That is there. And I hope I have answered the question, but I did miss out some of the important points because of the fact that I couldn't hear. But thank you for giving me the time. Thank you.
We have time for one. Thank you so much, Dr. Nanda. Dr. Charan Singh, do we have time for one last question? I saw Dr. Matthew Kurian wanted to say something.
Sure, you are in the chair, whatever you
So
decide.
maybe one last question, if that's okay with everybody. Dr. Kurian, did you have something to say?
Yes. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible to me.
Okay. I am Kurian from Mahatma Gandhi University of Kerala. First of all, I thank EGROW for this very insightful seminar. My question, I have some more questions, but I limit to, due to lack of time, I limit to one, not a question, but an observation. You see, as I am talking you from Kerala about the entrepreneurship and the empowerment, we have certain cases. For example, all of you referred to self-help groups. We have the Kudumbashree program. It could already prove its mettle, even not only nationally, internationally. So I think an important virtue of Kudumbashree is that women belonging to the grassroots, maybe from the socially deprived castes, economically deprived, they could come together and they could show their entrepreneurship. And marvelously, they could perform. And even they could bring products almost on a par with that of the multinational products. So I think this is an important proof for women empowerment as well as social and economic development. Also, we have Balavadi and such other similar programs. So, again, all of you know that Kerala women is much ahead of women in other parts of India. So, I project this example of Kudumbashree for the notice of others. I do have some other questions, but I do limit my observation to this because of lack of time. Thank you again very much. Again, I congratulate EGROW for these wonderful series. I used to attend almost all the programs, and I really enjoy. Thank you, Dr. Charan Singh.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kurian, for reminding us about Kudumbashree. I think many of us are aware about Kudumbashree and the wonderful work that they've done. The problem actually, Dr. Kurian, comes when you try to upscale or replicate the model. It doesn't work everywhere. The Kudumbashree model has been tried to be replicated in other parts of the country, but it hasn't really happened. And I think the reason for that is, as one of our speakers pointed out, is the regional diversity that we see in such issues, and also perhaps social and cultural norms. So somewhere as a nation, we have to see how we can, how these individual success stories, we could try to put them on more stable platforms so that we can replicate this across the country and, really increase women's participation in either through self-help groups or better paying jobs, or at higher levels of in offices and so on. I think I'll call a halt to the deliberations here with the permission of the speakers and everybody else who's been attending. Thank you to the speakers. You've been absolutely wonderful. And each one of you has brought your individual perspective on this very complex, but very relevant matter to the table. I think we all appreciate your interventions and your patience to have sat through this for 2 hours, despite your many pressing obligations. Thank you to all the participants for having attended and listened throughout, and for having contributed so much by way of questions, chat, discussions, which I have not read out all of them, though I've been following them and noticing that there are some interesting debates going on. Hopefully, we will find a way to discuss some of them in greater detail later on. Thank you to the organizers and Dr. Charan Singh in particular. Thank you for inviting me individually to this very interesting session today, and for having allowed us all so much freedom in the way in which we conducted and expressed ourselves. Over to you now, sir, Dr. Charan Singh, for any closing remarks.
Thank you. Dr. Ashok Vishandas is in the audience. He is a founder director of the think tank along with me. I just want to check with him for a minute if he wants to make any observation. Ashok? Okay. So I'll take this liberty then. I've spoken to Madam Sudha after nearly, I think, 10 years, and just looked at the way
2015, I think, was when we last met. Yes, 8 years.
8 years. And it was wonderful to see you and Dr. Harpreet and Principal Nanda, the strength and the discussions that you brought on the table. Dr. Saluja, of course, is as I always say, a financial wizard, and you could see it in her presentation and her preparedness to listen to new products and the way they're working on the new products. I want to thank the participants, speakers, and of course the chairperson. Next week, we have another fascinating discussion on services-led growth in India. And the speaker is going to be Fabrizio Zilito. He's from Yale University. They've come out with a paper, and we are discussing that paper on services-led growth. And as you know, that if India is going to catapult to what it is aiming to be in 2047, services will have to play a very prominent role. That is the objective of getting this paper discussed. So I'd invite all of you to please come and join in that discussion. It's a very technical paper, but the presentation will be in very plain Shakespearean English language. You're most welcome to join. We are also planning to do 10 webinar series on empowering women. In this lecture series, we intend to bring women in one panel, at least one woman who has not been empowered. It could be absolutely downtrodden women, which could be similar to your household maid, the cleaning staff, the dhobi on the street, or a sabji wala lady. So the panel will include people from that strata also. So we will have a very balanced discussion. I wanted to make an offer to Principal Nanda, and even if Professor Harpreet agrees, I would like to myself go on the streets of Delhi and conduct interviews with the beggar women, especially those women who are in the childbearing age and they carry the child along with them. And I want to, and if I go alone at my age and with my gender, you can understand the opposition I'll face. If any one of you or your students or your faculty wants to volunteer with me, I would like to go and interact with those women and find out why they're selling flour on the streets and how and what we can do to wean them away from those circumstances. And if you want to conduct research independently, identifying 10 or 15 or 20 such signal stops in Delhi, and then want to present your research at EGROW, I'll be happy to do that. But I would prefer the first one, where I would like to go and interact along with one of you or one of your faculty members or one of your students, so that they start talking to me. So if you're willing, I'm more than happy to participate in that survey in Delhi and empowering women. With that, let me close here. We have overshot by 2 hours and 10 minutes. This is the longest we have ever had. But this is the most interesting participative discussion also that we have had. So I want to thank each one of you for your patience and your contribution. And hope to see you.
I may volunteer with you, sir, for this flower selling woman. I'm there.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will get our students, once we have a certain concept note, we can agree to have student volunteers with you on this as a research project and as a social outreach. We'll be happy to do that.
Yes, we will. Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, both the principals. Then I'll circulate a brief concept note, a brief questionnaire, and the objectives of what I have in mind. I'll do
You
that.
can divide the areas. I think around the North Campus, you can take up, and ITO will take up, and then we can have a survey.
Sure, we could do that. That'll make it easy.
Yeah.
We could divide Delhi in 5 zones, and then we could do it. And I look for, if anybody else in the audience also wants to volunteer, as Mrs. Sachdeva has just done, I'll be more than happy. We could go as a small team.
I go with you. Your suggestion is very good, Dr. Harpreet, that we can divide this area into 5 units.
I'll connect with you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you.
So once again, thank you very much. Have a good weekend and see you next Friday. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.